Welcome back to In a Word. I'm here with Daylene Berry, the author of the very inspirational memoir, Sister of Silence. Welcome, Daylene.
Thank you, Kathy.
So let's just jump right into this. This is a difficult memoir to read, but also a very inspiring and hopeful and educational memoir. Can you tell us a little bit about it and why you wrote it?
Well, thank you, first of all. I take that as a great compliment. It's about a lot of different topics, social topics that people don't like to talk about. Suicide, domestic violence, mothers who have postpartum depression and think about killing their kids, childhood sexual abuse. So it's about all those things, and all those things happened to me. And I found myself over a course of years telling people about what had happened in my life, and they were just blown away. And it seemed like what I was telling them, they felt like they could use in some way. Mm-hmm. And so eventually, all these journals that I had kept and written down scraps and things, mm-hmm. I just turned it into a book and decided to share it with people.
Yeah. Now, it opens with you're 22 years old, you're the mother of 4 small children, in a not very good marriage, to put it lightly. Tell us about that moment and what brought you there. That
moment was a picture from my mind's eye that had happened hundreds of times at least throughout the time my children were very small. And it basically occurred only in my mind as a thought, but it was a terrifying thought nonetheless. And what took me to that point was the violence in the home and also the way my children were conceived. There was rape that occurred throughout the 10 years of marriage, which is not an uncommon thing in this country. The CDC reports that it's a major problem. But in my marriage, it caused me to become majorly depressed. And so I would have these thoughts of standing at a window with my child and just tossing them out the window. It was horrifying. And so I literally had to stay away from windows when they were little because I was afraid I would act on those thoughts. And so...
and you were going through post-traumatic stress syndrome. It was later diagnosed.
Yes, I was later diagnosed with that, yes. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I had no idea for years why I had those thoughts. And it eventually culminated with the incident where I sat down on the bathroom floor and I was pregnant with my 4th child. Did not know that he was a little boy. He had 3 older sisters. But I had reached the point where I literally could not function. Mm-hmm. My house was a wreck. My children were basically taking care of themselves. Their father was at work, and I just had these thoughts about ending it all, taking my children with me to protect them, because I couldn't imagine who would protect them from their father if I was gone and they were still alive. And so I sat down on the bathroom floor and devised a plan where I would put us all in the car and, you know, basically
drive over a cliff or something.
Drive over a cliff.
Very timely and helps us to get into your head. Now let's go back to how this whole thing started. You were 13 years old when you had your first sexual encounter with the man who would become your husband. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, I have to say this because in the world, sex is used as a weapon, and unfortunately, a lot of times, it's used as a weapon with children. And so what happened to me was my mother became a single parent by virtue of the fact that my father was an alcoholic, and his alcoholism caused them to separate. And they separated many times throughout my childhood and would go back together. And eventually the point came where he took a job overseas, she was by herself, and raising 2 daughters and eventually other children. And this young man who was a family friend, and I had known him since I was 7.
And how old was he?
The first time he came to the home to deliver firewood, I was 11. He's 7 years my senior. He would have been just 18.
So when you were 13, he's 20. So you're a 13-year-old kid, and he's a 20-year-old man.
Yeah.
And in his bedroom,
he talked me into sitting down on the bed and talking to him, and then before I knew it, you know, get under the covers, and then I won't touch you, and before I knew it, we were having sex. And that happened for a period of 3 years until I got pregnant.
Mm-hmm. And I think one of the shocking things is, and it was helpful to get into your mind, because when that happened, you said, oh my God, I'm not a virgin anymore, you know, I'm ruined, I'm gonna have to marry this guy. You almost knew it the first night. And so you kept going back to him, not really voluntarily, but you wanted attention. Tell us why you kept going back.
Young girls who don't have fathers in the home, they need a male role model, and they're all looking for male role models. And I did the same thing. And so that was part of it. That was part of it, because I felt like he was the absent parent, but I didn't recognize that at the time, obviously. It took me years. However, another part of it was he was very convincing when he said to me things like, "You're so pretty. If it wasn't for you being so pretty, I wouldn't have to do this." And so I felt like I was responsible. And as the oldest child in an alcoholic home, I had been responsible from a very early age. So responsibility was something that, you know, was like the biggest part of my makeup. So I took that, you know, very, very seriously. And then along with that, the guilt and the shame that I was feeling.
It was almost a perfect storm, your vulnerability and your innocence, you know, meeting up with this master manipulator is what he was in the beginning and throughout your marriage. So you went through this you're married to him for how long, 10 years?
10 years.
And then in the end, tell us about the happy ending, the good news. Journalism was one of the things that saved you.
Yeah.
Therapy saved you. Tell us how you got to this happy ending.
Well, I say that 4 things saved me. My children were primary, because that day in the bathroom, I just couldn't see ending their lives. They didn't deserve that anymore. They deserved it less than I did. But what happened was, that day made me realize I needed to do something to get us out of that situation. And so I didn't know what I could do to support us. The only thing I could do was write. I had written in high school, and so I just picked up the clips that I had from high school, the newspaper, and a couple of stories I'd done for the local papers, and carried them into the newspaper office. And the editor remembered me. She'd never met me, but she remembered my work, and I was literally blown away. And I left the office that day with a job. And the job for the next 3 years is what caused me not only to have a measure of self-esteem and to continue building on my self-esteem, but it put me in touch with people who worked with domestic violence, with police officers who answered the calls. And so it became slowly apparent to me as I covered these stories that this was the life I was living, and that it was really, really a serious thing, and it educated me so that I could get out.
Yeah. Well, we are going to have to wrap up right now. I would just say this is a very inspiring story. Like I said, it's not an easy story to read, but it's something that I learned a lot from reading, and I would recommend it to everybody who likes a good memoir, likes a good story, or who's interested in these issues. So thank you so much, Daylene, for joining us.
Thank you very much.
We'll be right back.